So students, you got that mortgage so that you could buy your house, and now you're living comfortably, just resting on the couch, looking at this beautiful place you just bought. But then a bill comes in the mail. Oh, isn't that always the case? You're just relaxing on the couch and then a bill comes in the mail and you're like, what is this other bill? I've already paid so much. And you have paid so much. Your mortgage, your closing costs. I mean, there's just so many fees to deal with. But there's another bill. When you buy a house, you have to pay what's called property taxes or real estate taxes on that house. So if you have an apartment that you own or a condo that you own or a house that you own, every year you're going to have to pay an additional tax. So let's go down and take a look at what the ramifications are in two different areas of the world. We have Texas and New York. Now, Texas does not have a state income tax. As a result, you'll see that their property tax or real estate tax is 2.5%, which is higher than New York's. So you might say, well, that's not fair. Why am I paying more in Texas? Well, it's because if you don't have a state income tax, typically your property taxes have to be higher. So in New York, it's 1.5%, and people typically are a little confused at this point because you're like, well, I bought my house for $135,000. So do I pay 2.5% on the purchase price or how much it's worth now? Because typically houses accumulate in value. They appreciate. So they get, they just grow in value, which is why a house is typically an excellent investment. But you can see that this has grown $65,000 to $200,000. So do I pay 2.5% on the smaller number or the higher number? Well, you just have to ask yourself, if you were a tax-hungry politician who wanted to get as much in taxes as possible, would you want to tax somebody on a lower number or a higher number? Ah, yes, of course. We want to grab as much in taxes as possible if we are working at the city, state, or local level. So, in fact, you are right. This 2.5% is not going to be assessed at the lower purchase value. It's going to be assessed at the value that the home is worth now, which is typically called the market value. Because if you were going to put your house on the market, it could fetch $200,000. Yes, this is what you purchased it for, but now it's worth this much, so you'll pay 2.5% on this much. So what does that mean? Well, 2.5% on $200,000, that might be kind of tough to do in your head, but again, we can go to our mental math skills and try and build those. I know 10%, simple, divide by 10. So if this were 10% and I divided by 10, I'd have 20,000. But it's not. It's not 20,000. That's too high. I know 2.5 times 2, maybe if I just disregard and I just say 25 times 2 is 50. So I know I'm going to have a 50 in here somewhere. So those are my two hints. I have like a 50 in there, and I know that if I divide it by 10, I'll get 20,000. So 50 is too low, but if I put two zeros here, I'll see 5,000. Yeah, 5,000 is a pretty good number when you compare it to 10% and 20,000. So again, we're just using number sense here to see what 2.5% of 200,000 is by using things that we know to be true. It is true that 2.5% on 200,000 is $5,000. So that's annual. That's per year. So in addition to paying your monthly mortgage payments, and in addition to the closing costs you had to pay for everybody to prepare the closing of your house so that you could actually own it, you have to pay an additional $5,000 per year in property taxes if you live in Texas on a market value of $200,000. Now, just to make yourself feel a little bit better, where does this $5,000 go? In a lot of places, this directly funds schools. All right, so if you're thinking about teachers' salaries, you're thinking about building new schools, You're talking about improving the materials for the kids in those classrooms. Property tax funds a heck of a lot for education. So although you're cutting a $5,000 check to the municipality that you live in, you can at least know that it's going toward a great cause. Now over to New York. Now in New York, we have a slightly lower property tax because they also have state income tax. So they don't charge quite as much for property tax. Do we do purchase value or market value? We already talked about that. We're going to do market value, what the home is worth now, and it's worth $220,000. So we think about this. We're like, well, it's kind of hard. What if I made this easier? What if I said, I'm just going to do 1%, right? So I'm going to take this half away. I'm just going to do 1% to build my mental math skills. 1% on $220,000 is $2,200. But it wasn't just 1%. It was 1.5%. So we need half of this, which is $1,100 more. So this was representative of 1%. And this was representative of half that, which would be 0.5%. And add those together, you'll have 1.5% of your property taxes, which is $3,300. So again, we're sharpening our mental math skills by just pulling numbers apart and trying to do what's easy. Because if you can do some of this math in your head, you can, first of all, impress a lot of people. They're going to be like, whoa, you just did that in your head. But two, you can just learn faster. Like I knew what 1.5% on 220,000 was just by splitting those numbers apart. So $3,300 is the property tax that you'd pay on a home that was valued that much in New York. You'd pay a lot more if you're in Texas, but that's because Texas doesn't have state income tax. Thank you very much for watching, and have fun paying your real estate property taxes.